Greetings, beautiful people. My name is Simon Javan Okelo. I am the CEO and founder of Madaraka Festival, and you're tuned in to another episode of the Madaraka Podcast. We are live and direct from AMP Studio in Westlands, Nairobi, Kenya. And today I'm really privileged to be here with my brother, Patrick Ondiek, aka Sapat Opips. This is a brother that is really one of the people that moves the needle in the music and cultural and creative industry in East Africa in general. I've seen you involved with some of the projects that preserve our traditional music, like Singing Wells. I've seen you work with some of the most legendary traditional musicians, and produce their music. And of course, you're working with the legendary Tabu Osusa, Kidum, Winyo. How are you doing today?
Hey, what an introduction. I'm great.
Yeah.
And this is quite funny because I've never actually been interviewed before because I've been behind the scenes all these years.
Yeah.
So it's quite an interesting experience, I must say.
Thank you, man. I just love the opportunity to speak to you because I feel like you have a lot to say, and that can be seen in the work that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
in the documentaries you've created, in the music you've produced. And a lot of the time it's only the stars, the artists that are being the spotlight is always on the big artists, but the people who make these artists big do not get the spotlight. And I feel like your story needs to be told a little more, and I'm honored to actually be here with you in this moment. But I want you to take us back, to your upbringing. Where were you born and raised, and how was it, growing up in whichever part of Kenya where you're born and raised? And also, how does that really impact who you've become today?
Well, I'm a city boy, actually. I was born in Nairobi, Kenya. I have grown up in Nairobi.
Yeah.
So I grew up in an estate in Nairobi called Nyungara.
Yeah.
Which is actually just behind the town center, so it's quite central, actually.
Yeah.
So it was a very mixed neighborhood. We had the people from the coast.
Yeah.
We had Indians in our neighborhood.
Mm.
So diversity was quite something that I grew up knowing different kinds of people, I'm a Luo, but I say I'm an urban Luo because I can't speak the language very well.
Yeah.
This is because in my estate when I was growing up, we didn't know who was what tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just speaking Swahili and English, and that's all we knew.
Yeah.
And I can say growing up it was beautiful.
Right.
I have beautiful memories growing up.
Right.
And growing up quite close to the city center, we became very free very early. Would go actually walk into town as kids.
Yeah.
And the fear of people, I think, left us very early. Yeah, that's the beauty of where we grew up.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love just imagining how Nairobi looked like those days,
What I can tell you about the early Nairobi, I remember, was that Nairobi River used to be clean, and we used to cross the river running, not what it is today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Man, so then, when I think about your career, I think about people like Bill Odidi, journalists who have also had great impact in the world, I think about Tabu Osusa, share with us some of the names that you've worked with that have changed your life. Maybe share three different names.
I would, the music bag, where did it hit me? The estate that I grew up in used to have live session musicians. And the biggest star that I grew up knowing, and he was the father to my personal friends in the same court that I grew up in, was the late Joseph Kamaru.
Oh.
Yes, if you know Joseph Kamaru, was this Kikuyu mega superstar.
Right.
Especially, even when Kanda Bongo Man came to Kenya, there was this thing about Kamaru versus Kanda Bongo Man. So I used to see this mzee going to work with his beautiful guitar, big cowboy hats. And for me, that is how I came to know that that's a musician.
Right.
So my friend's dad is a musician, and that is what he does for a living. So I grew up knowing that music can actually be work.
Right.
And another thing about the late Joseph Kamaru was he used to have like a mobile van that was decorated full of tapes that you could buy. You could stop there and buy any of his albums from the vehicle that he used to use to sell. So for me,
wow,
music has always been something that I respect from a very young age.
I love that.
Yeah, and I remember birthday parties at their place. He would play a tune or two.
Yeah.
So the superstar in him, I saw very early. And the same guy I would see on the newspaper. And he's somebody that I know, and he knows me very well, and he's my neighbor.
Right.
So you can imagine.
That's powerful.
And their birthday parties were not the same birthday parties we had in our houses. So it's like that house.
And it's a house financed by music.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, you know, I think the first time we met physically was at Ketebul Studios a number of years ago. I can't remember when. But what I do remember, it was at the very beginning stages of the work we do in Kisumu with the studio that we built there. And I came to seek advice, you know, from Tabu, from you. And, you know, just looking back, you know, over the years, and one of the things I touched and felt during that time was this compilation of Kikuyu music that you guys had done. What was the name of that project?
Retracing popular music. So Benga, Kikuyu. We did songs on protest and funk. Yes.
Man, I love the funk bit of it actually, because it also spoke about how in the 90s and 80s in Kenya, funk was the thing, you know.
Before disco came and DJs.
Yeah.
And why this happened is because the club owners or the disco owners felt it was cheaper to have a one person playing music than having a whole band, a whole band playing the music. After the early days of Kamaru, when I went into high school, we went into these music clubs, and one of the music clubs, this is when I met somebody who became later a superstar called Mr. Lenny. He was older than me in terms of class, but could tell that this guy has something. So when he finished earlier, I heard that he went and found a studio in California estate. So in the evenings, me and his brother were in the same class, would go to see where these guys are actually trying to do the music thing. And there used to be this studio called Scratch Records, which was before Caliph, and Clemo was a partner. And Clemo later on, they separated and he went to form the famous Caliph Records. Yes, and because of the friendship we had formed, and they were recording music. So when we finished high school, we were thinking, okay, now guys have started to do their own music, but there's something big that is missing. And that is people didn't know who these guys were. And that's the gap that's how I came into videography actually. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I want us to talk about your videography in just a moment. For those who are tuned in, this is Madaraka Podcast. My name is Simon Okelo, and I have my brother here, Patrick Ondiek, aka Sapat Opips. And, you know, we've talked about his upbringing in Nairobi, Kenya. We've talked about where the music bug, you know, hit him. And, you know, if you're watching this show for the first time, I want you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and give this video a thumbs up. Sapat, talk about your videography, because I feel that that's another aspect of your life that I feel is really rich. You know, I've seen you produce traditional musicians in their location, you know, in Uganda, in the coast, in all over Luo Nyanza, you know. This is incredible work you've been doing. How has it impacted you, but also how have you seen it impact, you know, traditional music?
Growing up in Ngara, I started also mixing with the rappers, early rappers from Ziwani. And these guys were talented, and everyone was like, how do we get into going into TV? And at the time, a very close friend of mine was the son of the deputy mayor then, who was called Joe Akech. So his brother had just come back from Japan with a small mini DV camera. So I was like, okay, now we have a camera. Now, you know. And they had a computer over there. The guy used to know. He had advanced a little bit. My friend, he knew how to edit. And me, I could play with the camera. And we started shooting small things. And at the same time, Caliph Records, Clemo had his younger brother called Luch, who was also had started doing music videos. But you see, the kind of camera they were using, they could not take the video material to the TV because they only used to accept DV tapes, and then they were using a high 8. It was a bigger tape. So any video that they would do at Caliph, they would come to our studio. We actually form a studio called Foxhall. So they would come to Foxhall for us to convert it into a format that they could play on TV. You know. So one day, an artist called, at that time he used to be called Mr. Lolo Lova, from Mombasa, found his way through we were 3 partners, Donna Ketch, myself, and a guy called Deriza. So Deriza was Macadam's. Now he later became Macadam's friend. So Macadam came and said, hey guys, I want a music video. And we did one music video for him. And he one day spoke to me on the side and said, I have this studio that I know has started somewhere. They go down in South B, but they do not have a videographer. Would you be interested in coming to meet the studio CEO and the entire team and see if you can work with them? And that is how I ended up in Unforgettable Music. So Unforgettable is the projects we're talking about, recording traditional stuff over the years. That is their forte, and that's what they do. And that's how I became their projects manager and videographer.
I love that.
Yes, and Unforgettable in 2011, we started a very ambitious project called Singing Wells. Because there's been this thing about what is the sound of Kenya, and it's been a big talk until now, and it's a big argument, you know, what is our sound? And a lot of younger guys used to come and say that, what do we have to refer to? You know, us guys, we're city guys. We don't know our sound. I don't know. I've never lived in the village. So I don't know how to improve that sound. All I know is, including myself, I grew up to B.I.G., Tupac, and all this Western stuff. So how do you tell me as a city guy to try and make my sound to sound like ours, you know? So we saw that gap, and through a partnership, we said, why don't we go retrace this music where it's from and package it in a format that these younger guys can consume. And then also archive for the future generations, you know, because these musicians are dying. And nobody is documenting this stuff.
100%.
Yes, you know, and once it's gone, it's gone. Who will we ask? How will you know that this music existed? You know, and for example, a good example I can give is there's a famous lady called Anyango who comes from Japan. She traveled all the way to learn an instrument that she thought was very powerful, called Nyatiti, from here. And now she's touring the world because of that, you know. And through our Singing Wells projects, we are the only people who managed to interview and record the person who taught Anyango. And he was a master of Nyatiti. So if it wasn't for Singing Wells, our project that we record and archive that material, there would not be evidence of that musician ever existed. You know, it'd just be tales, you know. But now if you want to go and learn that sound, it's there forever for the next generations to see. And through that project, today we are in 2024. We started in 2011, and we've recorded the entire country of Kenya. We've done the entire Uganda. We've done maybe 50% of Tanzania. And last year we did Rwanda. Yeah, so all this material is there, so there's no excuse anymore to say that I don't know what sound comes from where. It's now, unless you're a lazy musician. If you want to know a sound from any sound from Kamba, and you remember, we record the musicians, the sound plus the voices. So even the traditional songs, it's all now in the archive.
You know, when I think about this particular part of your career, there's a specific video where you and your crew recorded Winyo and a group of Ugandan traditional musicians along a road in Uganda. And it was such a powerful song that they were singing without any instrumentation. They were just clapping their hands and stamping their feet.
I think you're talking about the Batwa.
The Batwa.
The Batwa. That was a very beautiful project.
Yeah.
And these guys actually used to live in the forest with the gorillas,
Yeah.
at the border of Uganda and Rwanda.
Yeah.
And because they were accused of actually hurting the animals, they were moved out of the forest, which was not the truth. These guys really lived with those gorillas for so many years.
Yeah.
And it's a very small, they're like pygmies, they're small people.
Yeah.
And they have beautiful music
Yeah.
that nobody had ever explored before.
Yeah.
And I can say that was one of my highlights in that project we do called Singing Whales.
I loved it,
Yes.
especially when I saw Winyo, who is kind of an urban Luo musician.
Yes, yes.
Playing with them. And you know, I grew up in a traditional Luo church where we didn't have music instruments. We were just clapping, you know. And so that reminded me of those days in a way, you know.
And in Singing Whales, why you saw Winyo, we had a spot in the project called Influences. We choose one artist to travel with so that there's no excuse. So every trip would go with one artist to work with the guys and experience, so that in their next future projects they would put whatever they've had.
Yeah.
So
I
that
love
it's not just archiving.
I love that.
Yeah. How can you now take the music forward?
I love that.
Yeah.
So when you think about the current African music scene, because I feel that you have a very good view of what's going on globally for African music, but also East African and also Kenyan music, you know. Are you hopeful or are you worried?
I feel, I can only speak for us here in Kenya.
Yeah.
And I feel when I listen to what we are doing, I feel we're stuck. We're stuck, and what we are producing now, we can't export, and that's the reality. Our music here, Kenya, it's not crossing the borders. What does that say to me? Is that we are only making ourselves happy with we are experimenting on sounds that are not working. A country like Nigeria, for example, the music has history. You can clearly tell where it came from. These guys they've taken juju music. Juju music also, which is a traditional music. Fela also did the same. And they just made it pop. And it's now being consumed in the entire world. You know, for us, we're taking Jamaican music, and then we're giving it all these different names, gengeton, I don't know what. There's nothing like that. We're just playing Jamaican music and putting our sheng and exporting it as all these different names, but it's dying very quickly. Yeah.
You know, and again, music that is not well researched and music that is not from a deep place dies quickly. When I was watching some of the documentaries that you guys worked on, there was one that was comparing, it was actually mixing and fusing nyatiti and funk, you know, and it was really beautiful, you know. I don't know if you remember which particular project I'm talking about, but the pace at which nyatiti is being played works with so many genres of music.
Exactly.
And I don't know where I heard it, but I heard that for a long time nyatiti was like the foundation of Kenyan music, and it was almost like the juju music from Nigeria.
Benga, actually.
Benga.
You see, because the guitar, Benga is played by the modern guitar, yes, what came from abroad. But the sounds of Benga were borrowed from how the nyatiti sounds and how it's played. And Benga crosses across the Kalenjin music. What they come, no, that's Benga. And the early Benga, all these musicians, the Kambas, the Kikuyus, all the session musicians used to play in their music were coming from Nyanza. Because that's the home of the nyatiti, and that's where it all started. But it just went and faded away, you know. As we feel, and I blame I can say we blame our grandfathers. Me, I can't say our fathers, our grandfathers, because when they came to the city, they left the music behind.
Right.
And I know you've heard this before, and many Kenyans have heard this before, that whenever you came with anything from the village, you'd be called Mshamba.
Yeah.
It was a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, now, can you imagine? We left our music, we left how we dressed, we left our food also. You go into hotels in say, Lagos, you will eat exactly the same meal, different traditional foods you find in the village. What for example, you live in the States now. If you are staying in a hotel, what would you see? Can you ever even imagine seeing some traditional foods for breakfast in these fancy hotels you have in Nairobi? No,
you can't. Yeah.
And it's the Mshamba thing that to be a Mshamba used to be as kids.
It's being shamed.
Look, this guy is a Mshamba.
Yeah.
If you went to the village and came back with a nyatiti in my estate, what?
Yeah.
People are playing keyboards
you,
and you are.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and that's
100%.
and we don't have that value in music also. That's why we're stuck.
Yeah. How can we get out of being stuck?
I don't know. I don't want to call musicians lazy.
Yeah.
Because if they don't want to look back, they don't want to experiment.
Yeah.
Because out of experimenting, that's when you'll get your sound.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Man,
thank you. Thank you again. So I want you to think about 3 tips that you can share with our viewers when it comes to event production. This is the 10th year anniversary of Madaraka Festival, and a lot of people have been asking me, Simon, how have you done this for 10 years? And instead of answering, I ask my guests to give 3 tips that people should think of when they're producing an event, whether it's the scale of Madaraka Festival or whether it's a small event. What are the 3 tips that you'd share?
In my life in music business, because I can't put myself in a box, because I also manage. Right. And I manage in a way that I'm not your 100% manager, but I'm Mr. Fix-It. I make things work. I travel, I go to festivals, and I network with people. So they call me when they want somebody, and I make it happen. So networking is good. And having a big network of different people in the same line really helps, because approaching, for example, Madaraka wants artist X, but if they've networked nicely and they know somebody who's close to them, it will be easier to get them than just because sometimes artists have a whole list of demands and conditions that can be really mind-blowing. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I love
so that's number 1.
Okay.
Number 2, I would the experience. Recently, I was in a festival. I don't want to say where, because it started very well, beautiful. But now I think they are really more focused on profit. So, for me to experience a festival, if, for example, when I'm enjoying, when I'm having a good time, there's a list of things that all come with music and having a great time for me, for example. If it's my drink, it's what. So if a festival is now very expensive, now it's not, now imagine that now I've paid the ticket, for example, it's a 3-4 day festival, but every time I want to have a drink, I really have to calculate the hours, because it's become very expensive. Now when you move your festival from the experience to now business 100%, there you're going a different way, and you lose maybe clients, the guys who not clients only, but the guys who maybe started with you,
the die-hard fans,
and they follow you every year, and a family should grow, should not lose people. I
love that. Last tip
when you're doing bookings for the festival in terms of programming, wider, a very big team to do programming, because, for example, I can be a CEO of a festival and I feel I like this, and they must be I would want to have a team to help consult in terms of how to program.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, because also I know it costs a lot of money to do a festival because you must pay suppliers, sound technicians, all these people, the artists, to bring them over. but also there must be a balance. I used to do gigs, I used to promote, and I remember looking at the doors, because the artist has asked you, I want to come with my DJ and myself, and I must fly, so and this is my fee. So, and for example, you're making your money from the door and you don't have sponsors. It used to be a nightmare looking at the guys buying tickets. Yeah,
it's no joke.
Yeah.
You told me that you'd tell me about your t-shirt.
Oh, yes. So in my many networking and interactions, I bumped into a guy called Bako. He was on holiday in Kenya with his wife. So he said, hey, man. We started talking, and then he said, by the way, I'm a musician. I'm like, and that's my line. How it's so bad that I'm meeting you when you're about to go back, What kind of music do you do? He said, I do rock, reggae, and traditional music, So I said, that's fantastic, man. He said, no, brother, we can make it happen. So I sold him a dream. I said, if we can start talking, I know I can bring you here. We can have shows in Nairobi. We can have, because I would want you to see Kenya. So for me, is the city. Then I'd take you western, Kisumu or anywhere, and then the coast. For me, I'd feel like that's the entire map of the country. So we started talking, and Bako is from Mayotte Island, and he, Mayotte is under France, and they get a lot of support. So he was able to get support to get flights to come to Kenya for the entire 10-team band. Yes, and while he was working on that, I was talking to different venues and selling them the dream. That exactly how I told Bako. So I managed to book for them 2 gigs in Nairobi, and then Kisumu and the coast. So in Nairobi we played at the Alliance, and how I program it is we played on a Friday at the Alliance. The same night after the show, we drove to Kisumu. We played at what is it called? At the beach.
Kisumu Beach Resort?
No.
Dunga Hill Camp.
Yes, at the Dunga. Oh, how did I forget Dunga?
Yeah.
And then the next week we played in Kilifi.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So from that time we've been working together. I was recently in Tanzania to try and make for them a program for this year.
I love that.
So I'm their East African tour manager.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you again, my brother.
You're welcome.
And thank you for tuning in. This was an incredible conversation with Sapat Opips, Patrick Ondiek. I just thank you again, man. Any closing comments?
Wow, this has been interesting, actually. I can't wait to watch myself. Because I hope that you enjoy the interview.
I did.
Yes, and I didn't know I had stories to tell.
You do?
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. Of course.
All the best to Madaraka.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to working with you in the future.
Asante.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.